Night does not always fall all at once. Sometimes it arrives in thin layers, one quiet shade at a time, and the first thing to move across it is only a small, bright line. A shooting star, as people often call it, appears for a moment, then fades, and the sky goes back to being still. Yet even that brief flash has a long life before and after its visible moment, and it leaves behind a trail of gentle facts that are calm to think about. If you are listening while your room is dim and soft, you can imagine that small bright line crossing far above any city, above any roof, above any sleeping field. It is not really a star at all, but a tiny piece of stone or metal, moving so quickly that the air itself becomes a spark around it. For a second, perhaps a little longer, it seems to right itself across the dark. Then it is gone, and the night, patient as ever, keeps the memory without saying much. Long before people had careful instruments, they still noticed these falling lights. They gave them many names, because names are one of the quiet ways humans keep company with the sky. Some saw omens, some saw gifts, some simply saw beautiful accidents. In one place, a streak in the heavens might have been linked with a wish. In another, it might have been connected with a story about travelers, or gods, or ancestors passing through the upper dark. The details changed from one culture to another, but the wonder was similar. A brief fire in darkness has always invited attention, and the interesting thing is that the light we see is not the object itself, but the air around it. The little traveler, called a meteoroid when it is still in space, becomes a meteor when it enters the atmosphere. The word is old, and it comes from a term for things high up in the air. That is a gentle reminder that language itself often grows beside the sky, and then stays there, waiting for later listeners to discover it. The object rushes downward, and the friction, or more simply the immense pressure of moving through air so fast, creates heat and glow. What we notice is not the stone alone, but its brief conversation with the atmosphere. There is something restful about that idea. A tiny object, perhaps smaller than a pebble, can be turned into a bright mark by the simple fact that Earth has air. In a place without air, the same piece would travel silently. No streak, no sparkle, no quick white thread, just motion. But here, with our delicate envelope of atmosphere, there is light, and then there is disappearance. The sky, in a way, writes and erases at the same time. Some meteors are grain-sized, little fragments no larger than dust. Others are larger, though still modest compared with the planets and moons that surround them. Most of the ones people notice are gone before they reach the ground. They burn away in the upper air, and only a small portion may survive as a meteorite. That word belongs to a quieter ending. A meteorite is what is left when a piece of the sky has become solid enough, or fortunate enough, to descend all the way to Earth. Many such stones are dark, not glowing at all, and they can look unexpectedly ordinary after their bright journey. Their life in fire is far more dramatic than their life in the hand. This is one of the small comforts of astronomy, that it often turns excitement into patience. The dazzling thing is usually made of ordinary matter. The extraordinary part is the distance it has crossed, and the speed with which it has done so. A meteor may be only a tiny speck, yet it can move at tens of kilometers per second, which is a speed so large that it almost becomes hard to imagine. It is easier to picture it as a quick brushstroke, a brief stroke of chalk on black paper, or a silver thread snapped across velvet. And if the night is clear, there may be more than one. Some evenings are especially generous, when Earth passes through a field of debris left behind by a comet or asteroid. Then the sky can offer a meteor shower, a steady scattering of flashes that seem to come from one point and then spread outward. The names of these showers are often tied to constellations because the streaks appear to radiate from a particular area of sky. Perseids, Leonids, Geminids, all of them carry old names that sound almost like the names of rivers or ancient families. They remind us that the sky has a geography too, even if it is made of patterns rather than hills. Comets deserve a quiet mention here because they are often related to these falling lights. A comet is not a meteor and not a shooting star, but it can leave behind a trail of dust and small debris as it travels around the sun. Over time, Earth may drift through that trail. The result is not a collision in the dramatic sense, but a meeting. Our planet and a long-gone ribbon of comet dust touch, and the fragments glow when they enter the atmosphere. In this way, a meteor shower is a kind of seasonal memory, a return of tiny pieces left behind long ago. It is not unlike finding an old note in a coat pocket, except the note has been orbiting the sun. There is something lovely in the fact that many meteor showers happen at roughly the same time each year. They can become part of the calendar, like the first cold evening, or the return of certain flowers, or the way a particular window catches the afternoon light in winter. People come to expect them. They lie back in blankets or stand in fields or look up from quiet backyards. The sky, so often vast and impersonal, becomes intimate for a while. A meteor shower does not ask much from anyone. It simply arrives, repeats its brief, bright gestures, and departs. The Earth is always moving through space, and so, in a sense, it is always meeting dust. Much of it is harmless. Most of it is invisible. The atmosphere deals with it quietly, as it deals with so many things. Tiny grains enter, flash, and vanish. It is easy to forget how much unseen material is near us at all times. The air is full of fragments, not only of rock and ice, but of pollen, salt, soot, and the remains of distant things. The sky is not empty, only mostly clear. Sometimes people imagine meteors as rare visitors, but the Earth is touched by cosmic dust constantly. In fact, many of the tiny particles that fall from space are so small that they drift down almost unnoticed, becoming part of the ordinary dust on roofs and roads. Their arrival is less like a crash and more like a soft settling. It is a reminder that the boundary between Earth and space is thinner than it seems. The planet is not sealed off from the rest of the universe. It is being lightly sprinkled by it all the time. If you were to hold a meteorite in your hand, you might notice that it often feels denser than expected. Some are stony, some are rich in iron, and some contain both rock and metal. A few have unusual textures, little bubbles, or surfaces that seem melted because they were heated as they crossed through the atmosphere. Their outer crust may be darkened, a thin skin formed in fire, and yet inside they can preserve ancient information. Some meteorites are older than the Earth itself, carrying clues about the early solar system, about the cloud of matter from which our planet and the others were formed. That idea can be almost soothing if you sit with it gently. A rock that fell from the sky may be older than mountains, older than oceans, older than the continents as we know them. It can be a small relic from the beginning of things, though of course beginnings are not always sharp edges. The solar system formed gradually in slow motion compared with human lives. Dust gathered, heat rose, worlds took shape, and some fragments never became part of a planet at all. They remained wandering pieces, and occasionally one of them finds its way to the ground beneath a sleeping world. People have used meteorites in many ways when they have found them. Some were admired as sacred objects, some were fashioned into tools or ornaments, and some were simply collected because they were unusual and beautiful. Ancient iron objects in certain places may have come from meteorite metal, long before humans learned to smelt iron from ore in the usual way. The sky, in other words, has sometimes provided materials before people knew their source. That is a quiet kind of gift, and it blurs the line between heaven and earth in a very material way. The old association between meteors and messages from above was not always entirely irrational. A bright streak could feel startling, and surprise often turns quickly into meaning. But today we can also admire the scientific side without losing the older feeling of wonder. We know a meteor is a fragment of matter, and still it can feel like an event. Understanding does not always reduce beauty. Sometimes it gives beauty a wider room to move in. And then there is the sound of the word itself, meteor. It has a soft, floating quality, even though the thing it names is swift. Perhaps that is fitting. Many celestial names have this gentle contradiction. Stars are ancient and distant, yet the word star is small and easy to say. The moon is a cold body, but moonlight can seem warm. A meteor is brief, but it has inspired long attention. The language of the sky often fits inside the mouth like a pebble polished by water. When a meteor appears, the eye has only a moment to follow it. This is one reason people feel moved to make wishes. The mind, aware of the fleetingness, tries to place a small desire into the same line of time. A wish is not a scientific instrument, of course. It does not measure anything, but it reveals how humans respond to transience. We see something vanishing and we respond with hope, if only for a second. It is a tender reflex. Not all shooting stars are equally bright. Some are faint and quiet, seeming almost to hesitate before fading. Others blaze more strongly, and a few leave persistent trains, a glowing afterimage that lingers in the air for several seconds. These trains can twist and drift as winds high above the ground move them around. So even after the meteor itself has disappeared, the sky still carries a small trace of its path. It is as if the night keeps a feather-light memory of the event. That lingering trail is one of the most beautiful parts. The flash says, "I was here." The afterglow says, "A little of me remains." In that way, a meteor behaves like so many things in nature. A wave rolls in and then recedes, but the wet line on the shore stays a while. A candle is blown out, but the room keeps a scent of wax and smoke. A meteor, too, leaves a brief impression. The universe often prefers these modest traces over grand declarations. If you have ever watched a dark sky long enough, you may have noticed that it changes almost imperceptibly. The stars do not move much, but your own attention does. At first you notice the brightest points, and then your eyes begin to gather in the softer ones. A meteor can arrive while you are looking somewhere else, and that is part of its charm. It does not wait for your readiness. It appears, offers its small radiance, and disappears before anyone can fully hold it. The sky is generous in this way, but also shy. Some cultures built careful calendars around the heavens, watching when certain meteors returned, or when comets appeared, or when star patterns shifted with the seasons. They were not merely curious. For farmers, sailors, and travelers, the sky was a practical guide. Even a passing light could become part of a larger pattern of timing and navigation. The night was not empty to those who depended on it. It was full of signals, some reliable, some mysterious, all worth remembering. And there is a long thread running from those older observations to the quiet science of today. Astronomers still study meteor showers because they reveal the paths of dust and the behavior of small bodies in the solar system. Some showers are linked to well-known parent comets. Others have associations with asteroids, which shows that the dividing lines in space can be softer than they first appear. Objects shed material, debris disperses, orbits shift slowly. Even the sky keeps weather in a sense, though it is a weather of grains and paths rather than clouds and rain. It is possible to think of meteor showers as celestial rain, though the analogy is not perfect. Rain falls from clouds formed in Earth's atmosphere, while meteors are intruders from outside. Still, both bring a sense of pattern and return. Both can fill a landscape with repeating motion, and both are often most lovely when observed with patience without hurry. A person lying quietly under the night can feel that rhythm in the body, as if the sky is breathing in a different scale. There are also fireballs, larger and brighter meteors that can outshine the stars for an instant. Sometimes they are visible even when the moon is bright, because their glow is so strong. They may fragment as they fall, breaking into smaller pieces, each with its own trail. A fireball is still not a star, despite the name, but the language makes room for emotion before precision. Humans named these things long before they had perfect definitions, and the older names often remain because they fit the feeling. A few meteor events have entered history not as gentle streaks but as memorable falls. In some cases, people collected the stones afterward and preserved them. These meteorites became objects of study, but they also retained a certain sacred strangeness. A stone that fell from the heavens is difficult to look at casually. Even now, museums keep such stones under soft light, and visitors often lean in closer than they expect to. Something in us knows that a rock is not just a rock when it has travelled so far, yet most meteors never reach a museum. Most are anonymous, unseen by anyone, spent in the upper air. They become part of the planet's thin receipt of cosmic matter. That is perhaps one of the quietest truths about the night sky. It is not only a scene to admire, it is also a place of exchange. Dust comes in, light is made, matter is altered, then the sky looks unchanged, as if nothing happened, though something always did. The atmosphere itself deserves a little praise. It is the reason meteors shine. It protects us, and at the same time it performs one of nature's simplest spectacles. A fragment from space meets air and energy becomes light. The same atmosphere that makes clouds and rain also turns tiny rocks into falling sparks. It is a barrier and a stage, a shield and a lantern. We often think of air as empty, but it is active in so many small ways. In the upper layers where meteors begin to glow, the air is very thin. There is not much of it compared with what we breathe, but there is enough for friction and compression to matter. The object moves so fast that it cannot slip through without consequence. The result is heat, vaporization, ionization, and light, though these are words with sharp edges, and bedtime may prefer softer ones. So we can simply say that the air and the stone meet, and the meeting shines. If a meteor is especially large, it may produce a sonic boom when it reaches lower altitudes, though that sound arrives later, after the light has been seen. This is because light travels so much faster than sound, so people may look up, watch a dazzling streak, and only afterward hear a distant rumble. It is one of those natural delays that make the world feel layered, like a story told in two different voices. First the eye learns, then the ear catches up. And if the piece is small enough, no sound follows at all, only silence. That may be the most common ending, a flash in the dark and then nothing obvious, but perhaps that is enough. The night never seems impatient with vanishing things. It allows them to happen and lets them go. Human beings, by contrast, often want what is seen to stay seen. We ask for continuity. A meteor teaches a gentler arrangement. It says that a moment can matter even if it is not retained. One reason shooting stars remain so beloved is that they are shared events without becoming crowded ones. Two people can stand under the same sky and notice different meteors. A whole field can wait and then all look up at once when one bright line appears. Yet each person experiences a private instant of surprise. It is communal and solitary at the same time, which is a rare and comforting balance. The sky is large enough to give everyone a slightly different memory. Some meteor showers are more active than others. Their rates can vary depending on how dense the debris trail is and where Earth meets it. Observers count meteors over a period of time, sometimes noting how many appear in an hour under good conditions. But to the casual listener, the exact number is less important than the feeling of expectancy. A shower can be abundant or modest, and still it invites the same quiet looking. The value is not only in quantity, it is in attention. There is also a simple pleasure in knowing that many meteor showers are ancient in origin. The dust was laid down long ago, sometimes centuries or millennia, as comets made repeated journeys around the sun. A comet may have long since moved on, perhaps even changed shape, and yet its remnants continue to visit Earth with regular grace. In this way, the present night contains fragments of a far older motion. The sky keeps its old habits. People sometimes speak of the cosmos as indifferent, and in many ways it is. It does not arrange itself for our comfort. And yet there are moments when its indifference looks surprisingly delicate. A meteor streaking over a sleeping town is one of them. The event is not sent for anyone in particular, and still it feels personal. Perhaps beauty is often like that. It happens without regard, but it lands with meaning. The earliest skywatchers may not have distinguished between meteors, comets, and other celestial events as precisely as we do now. To them, the heavens were an active field of signs. Even so, their careful noticing was valuable. Many traditions preserved records of unusual lights, falls, and appearances. These records help modern scholars understand how often such events were seen and how people interpreted them. History, in a way, is full of night observations. It is made of human beings lifting their eyes, and sometimes, quite simply, of human beings sitting by a fire and saying, "Did you see that?" That ordinary sentence may be one of the oldest in astronomy. It carries astonishment without analysis. A meteor can restore us to it. For 1 second or two, the sky becomes undeniable. If you are drifting toward sleep, it may be pleasant to imagine a field under a dark and open sky. The grass is still. A fence line is barely visible. Somewhere nearby, an insect speaks softly into the grass. Above, the constellations remain in their places, and between them a meteor crosses, quick and bright, then leaves a little darkness behind. The field does not change much. The stars do not change much. But something has passed through, and the passing is enough. There are stories of meteorites in collections that were passed from hand to hand, admired for their weight and texture. People sometimes do not expect a sky stone to feel so ordinary or so heavy. Iron meteorites can be especially dense. They may show a pattern inside when cut and polished, a geometric crossing of bands formed as the metal cooled in space. These patterns, seen in museum specimens, can look almost like quiet architecture. The sky, after all, has its own structures. Some meteorites are linked with rare types of rock from the earliest days of the solar system. Others are pieces knocked from the Moon or Mars by impacts, later finding their way to Earth. That thought can be very soothing in its scale. A stone on a table, once part of another world and now resting under human hands. The journey is vast, but the moment of rest is small and simple. The universe is full of such contrasts. It is also worth remembering that not every glowing thing in the sky is a meteor. Aircraft, satellites, re-entering space hardware, and other human-made objects can appear as moving lights. The modern sky has added its own traffic. Sometimes a person expects a meteor and sees a satellite instead, or a reflected glint from a piece of equipment. This too is part of the current age, the sky layered with both ancient dust and human inventions. It becomes a place where old and new pass each other in silence. Yet the classic shooting star still holds its own particular charm. It is unplanned in the human sense. It cannot be summoned, only awaited. That waiting is gentle because it does not require effort so much as openness. One looks up, breathes, and lets the dark stay dark. Then, if fortune is kind, a brief line appears. If not, the stars remain, and that is enough too. Perhaps that is why meteor watching is often peaceful. There is very little to do except be present. No knobs to adjust, no complicated equipment needed for the simplest experience, no urgent interpretation. Just eyes, sky, and time. In a world of constant noise, that modest arrangement feels almost like a gift. And the stars around the meteor, those distant suns, make the moment seem both larger and smaller. Larger because the sky is immense, smaller because the streak itself is so brief. We live in a universe where extremes touch each other without complaint. Vastness and transience can share the same frame. A meteor is one of the cleanest examples of this. It is a tiny event in a boundless place. It may help now and then to remember that every falling star seen from Earth is a small act of disappearance and visibility at once. Something was out there, moving for perhaps millions of years in some form, and now it is briefly here in light. Then it becomes part of the atmosphere or the ground or the unseen dust of the world. It is not lost exactly. It has simply changed form. That is a thought with a very calm shape. Change is happening all the time, but much of it is soft and gradual. A meteor makes change visible, and then it moves on. It gives the mind a small lesson in impermanence without ever raising its voice. The lesson is only this, that brief things can still be beautiful, and that passing does not cancel meaning. So if you are listening in the quiet hours, you can let the sky become a little wider in your mind. You can imagine the dark above, the patient air, the hidden dust, the old comets carrying their leftover threads. the tiny stones entering as sparks, the occasional brighter fireball, the faint afterglow that lingers and thins. Each detail is small. Together they make a sky that is alive with delicate motion, and there are more quiet facts still if you would like them. Some meteor showers are easier to see after midnight because the side of Earth facing forward into its orbit is then catching more debris. Some are best viewed away from city lights, where the sky can keep its deeper darkness. Clear moonless nights reveal more of the faint members of a shower, while bright moonlight washes out the smallest streaks. So even the moon, companion of the night, changes what can be seen. The sky is always arranging itself around a few bright presences. People sometimes prepare blankets, warm drinks, and a patient chair when watching meteors. This is not because the event requires ceremony, but because comfort helps attention remain soft. Looking upward for a long time can make the neck ache, and the cold can become a distraction. A chair, a coat, a thermos, a field or porch or hillside, and the sky above, this is enough to create a small ritual. Human beings are good at turning attention into a cozy practice. The Milky Way may also be visible on a dark enough night, a hazy river of stars stretching overhead. When meteors cross through it, they seem to stitch one brightness through another. The contrast can be lovely. Even then, the event remains brief. The eye catches, the mind follows, and then it is over. The Milky Way remains. The meteor is the visitor. In old stories, visitors from the heavens often carried meaning beyond themselves. Today we can admire them without needing to assign a message. That freedom is pleasant. We can say this is a rock fragment, this is atmospheric glow, this is a comet trail, and still keep the childlike feeling of wonder. Knowledge does not have to be harsh. It can be quiet and soft, like turning a page without waking anyone. A meteor's brightness depends on its size, speed, and composition, among other things. A fast piece can make a strong flare even if it is small. A slower one may be more modest. Composition matters too because different materials vaporize and glow in different ways. But for the observer on the ground, all that complexity is distilled into one simple impression, a line of light. The sky is always translating physics into beauty. There is a kind of poetry in the fact that something so fleeting can inspire such long memory. A person may remember a meteor seen in childhood for years afterward, not because it lasted long, but because it was clean and unmistakable. It interrupted ordinary darkness with perfect brevity. Many experiences are memorable because they are large. Meteors are memorable because they are small and exact. And if one is fortunate enough to find a meteorite after a fall, the object can be surprisingly patient in the hand. It does not glow. It does not speak. It simply rests, carrying its ancient origin in a quiet way. There is something almost monastic about a meteorite, if that does not sound too unusual, something that has renounced spectacle after performing it. First fire, then silence. The earth itself is full of impact scars, too, though many are hidden by water, erosion, vegetation, and time. Craters form when larger objects strike, not the same as the brief streak of a meteor seen from the ground, but related in the broad family of celestial encounters. Most nights we only notice the harmless, burning fragments. The larger pieces tend to leave marks that last much longer. Still, both belong to the same larger story of the solar system as a place of movement, collision, and slow shaping. It is easy to forget that the sky is part of Earth's environment. We speak of weather on the ground, but there is weather above too, and a soft traffic of particles coming and going. The atmosphere and the magnetosphere, the solar wind and cosmic rays, the dust and debris, all of it forms a quiet exchange around the planet. Humans live not in isolation, but inside a layered nest of forces. Some of those forces are visible only when they glow. A meteor is one of the clearest examples. It makes the invisible briefly visible, then gives the sky back its stillness. It is an event that does not need an audience, yet becomes one when people are looking. The human act of noticing is part of the beauty. Without a watcher, the flash still happens, but with a watcher it becomes a memory. That may be why bedtime and meteors suit each other. Both are about transition. One thing becomes another, one moment yields to the next, one kind of attention softens into another. The day gives way to night, the sky gives way to sleep. A streak appears, then fades, the body settles, the thoughts loosen. And somewhere above, the small dust of space continues its quiet path, meeting air, making light, and disappearing without complaint. If you wish, you can imagine one final meteor, not as an ending, but as a gentle companion to the dark. It crosses a clear sky over a silent landscape, over rooftops and fields and dark water, over stone and grass and sleeping windows. It leaves a thin line, and then even that line thins away. The stars remain, the air remains, the night remains. And in that remaining there is room for rest. The old sky keeps its habits, dust arrives, light appears, shadows deepen again. A comet far away carries on. A meteor shower waits for its season. A meteorite rests in a drawer, a museum case, a hand, or the earth itself. And the listener, somewhere below all of this, may drift closer to sleep, carried not by excitement, but by the soft repetition of things that briefly shine and then settle. Even now there are likely tiny grains entering the atmosphere over quiet oceans, over mountain ridges, over deserts, over sleeping towns with porch lights dimmed low. Most will be spent unseen. A few will become visible to some person who happens to look up at the right second. That is enough. The universe does not need to announce itself loudly. Sometimes it simply draws a line and lets that line go. So let the dark be dark, and let the thought of shooting stars be gentle. They are not really stars, and they do not remain, but they have their own small permanence in memory, in language, in the patient records of people who looked up and noticed. What remains is not the flash itself. What remains is the feeling that the sky is alive, and that a tiny fragment of matter can become a moment of light. And if your eyes are growing heavy now, you can let that idea settle without holding it tightly. A meteor crosses, a little glow lingers, the atmosphere keeps its quiet work, and the night continues. The air cools, the constellations stay where they are, the world becomes softer around the edges. One more brief spark might come, or none at all, and either way the sky will still be there, patiently keeping watch while you rest. There are still more small details, should you need them, drifting at the edge of this calm sky. Some meteors are created when tiny pieces of comet dust are no bigger than grains of sand. Some can be seen even from city outskirts if they are bright enough, though the deeper darkness of country air reveals more. The best viewing often comes when the observer gives the eyes time to adapt, because the dark needs a little patience before it begins to show its full depth. It is a slow agreement between attention and night. A meteor shower also has a radiant point, the place in the sky from which the streaks seem to come. This is an effect of perspective. Parallel lines, when seen from far away, appear to meet. It is a quiet example of how the mind organizes space. The sky is not always as it seems at first glance, and that is part of its charm. We look up, and geometry becomes visible in motion. The names of showers often preserve the constellations near their radiance, and those constellations carry their own old stories, though tonight we can leave them just as patterns. A pattern of stars can be enough. Humans have always been good at finding shapes in darkness. A hunter, a lion, a twin, a harp, a swan. The imagination reaches up, and the sky receives it without argument. Sometimes a meteor will appear so close to the horizon that it seems to skim above the earth, though it is really far higher than any plane. The apparent closeness comes from scale and perspective. The eye loves to bring distant things near. This too is a tender habit of perception. We translate vastness into a size we can feel. In a way, that is what this whole subject asks of us. A meteor begins as a fact of dust and orbit, of speed and atmosphere, and then becomes, in human attention, a small and lovely event. The fact remains, and the feeling remains beside it. There is no need to separate them too sharply. The calmest understanding often allows both. So as the night continues, you might imagine the last trace of a falling star fading above a dark field. No one hears it, and yet the atmosphere has done its brief work. The fragment has become light, and the light has become memory. Then the memory becomes simple quiet again. That sequence is very old, and it happens over and over, each time with its own slight variation, like a familiar tune played more softly. Now, if sleep is near, let the thought of those quiet flashes remain only as a pleasant shape in the dark. A small stone, an ancient trail, a brief line of fire, a patient sky. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding. Just the night, its long dark fabric, and the calm little sparks that visit it from time to time. The stars keep their distance. The meteors keep moving. The air keeps listening. And you gently may rest. If you are still awake a little longer, there is one last calm thing to notice. In some languages and older traditions, shooting stars were not always described with the same exact distinction we use now. The human eye, after all, sees the event before it analyzes it. So a bright meteor, a comet, a flashing aurora, and other luminous things could all be gathered under the broad feeling of something arriving from above. Only later did careful observation separate them. That slow sorting is one of the patient habits of knowledge. But the first impression, the simple human response, remains unchanged. A light appears where no light should be. The watcher pauses. The dark gives way to a line. Then the line is gone. That pause, that little inhaled moment, may be the most ancient part of the experience. It belongs to everyone who has ever looked up. And with that, the sky can grow even quieter. The meteor trail is already fading. The night is not empty, but it is serene. Dust drifts, stars hold still. The world turns with its usual calm endurance. Nothing needs to happen now. The listener can simply drift as the earth drifts, as the dust drifts, as the last bright memory of the shooting star becomes only a gentle afterglow inside the dark. There is no need to catch it, or explain it, or keep it from leaving. It has done enough. It has shown that even a tiny fragment of the universe can become a brief piece of light, and that light can be enough to soften the mind. So let the room be quiet, let the ceiling become a night sky, and let the mind follow the smallest, slowest path towards sleep. And if another thought comes, let it come softly. Perhaps it is the image of a meteor shower over a still desert, or above a line of winter trees, or reflected faintly in a black lake. Perhaps it is only the idea of the atmosphere itself, endlessly patient, making brightness from movement. Either way, it can rest there without effort. The sky does not hurry, neither must you. Above, the last visible trace is gone. What remains is the dark and the calm memory of motion. That is enough for now, and for a bedtime that deepens in its own time, like evening settling into night, like dust settling after a gentle fall, like a star no longer seen but still quietly remembered. Far above the place where the visible streak has vanished, the sky continues in its usual silence, as if nothing unusual has happened at all. That is part of the comfort of it. The universe does not need to announce every small event with ceremony. A grain enters the atmosphere, burns, glows, and is gone. The night remains. In this way, the sky teaches a kind of modesty, a reminder that even brilliant moments may arrive and leave without upsetting the larger stillness. And that stillness has been present for a very long time. Long before cities, long before written calendars, long before anyone thought to name the constellations in careful systems, people were already seeing these brief lights. They may not have known the word meteor, but they knew the sensation of surprise. A streak across darkness would have meant something worth remembering. It might have been taken as a message, an omen, a mark from the gods, or simply one more mystery in a world full of mysteries. Old stories are often built from that gentle confusion between what is seen and what is understood. A bright line appears, and the mind, eager and reverent, begins to make a home for it in language. In ancient Greece, the heavens were full of beings and meanings. In many traditions, falling stars were not merely fragments of stone. They could be interpreted as souls or signs, or the sudden opening of a path between worlds. In some places, people quietly made wishes, not because the stars could surely grant them, but because the moment itself seemed to ask for hope. There is something very human in that. A wish made at the sight of a meteor is small, almost shy. It does not argue with the sky, it only speaks into it for an instant. Then the sky is dark again, and the wish belongs to the same silence as before. Perhaps that is why the custom persists in so many forms. It gives a brief, gentle shape to the feeling that something rare has passed by. The ancient sky was not, of course, truly emptier than ours. It only felt that way because there was less light from the earth. Without electric lamps, the heavens would have seemed deeper, more crowded with stars, and any sudden motion across them would have been all the more remarkable. One can imagine a shepherd in a quiet valley, or a traveller on a road cut through hills, or a watchman on a city wall, all looking up at the same unexpected flash. The lives around them may have been very different, but the moment in the sky would have been shared. And because the moment was so brief, memory would have done much of the work. People told one another about what they had seen: a streak over a roof, a blaze above a temple, a bright runner across a field of stars. With each retelling, the event grew not necessarily larger, but more meaningful. The story kept it warm for a while longer than the sky did. Even now, when science can explain the event with precision, the old tenderness has not disappeared. Perhaps that is because explanation and wonder are not enemies. They simply rest at different speeds. One moves through measurements, angles, minerals, and atmosphere. The other moves through awe, timing, and the soft inner hush that follows surprise. A shooting star lives in both ways at once. It is a piece of dust and a piece of feeling. The dust itself has an origin so old it is almost difficult to imagine in a single thought. Some grains drift for millions of years through space. They may have come from comets, from collisions between asteroids, from the slow wearing down of ancient objects that circle the sun. They travel in the dark, cold and patient, until one small meeting with Earth changes everything. The air, usually a quiet companion, becomes dense enough to create fire. That fire is not the burning of a flame in the usual sense. It is the friction, the compression, the transformation of motion into light. The grain moves so fast that the air in front of it is suddenly squeezed and heated. The material itself may vaporize. Some meteors burn entirely away, leaving no trace beyond the light they made. Others survive the descent and become meteorites, touching the ground as stones from space. A few are found and held, weighed in the hand, studied under glass, their outer surfaces marked by the heat of arrival. It is a curious and almost intimate thing to hold a rock that has come from the sky. Yet even that stone may once have been part of a larger body, a body that formed early in the history of the solar system. In that sense, a meteorite can be older than the oldest mountains on Earth, older than oceans in their present form, older than life as we know it. The mind can rest on that fact for a while and feel itself become very small in a peaceful way. Smallness in this context is not humiliation, it is relief. To be near something ancient is to be released from the demand to be central. The stars do not ask us to be important, they only ask us to notice. A meteor, brief as breath, carries that same invitation. It says in its own silent language that the world is larger and older and more surprising than we can keep in our hands. Many cultures found ways to remember that. In China, records of unusual celestial events were kept with remarkable care, because the sky and the state were thought to be connected in subtle, serious ways. In Mesopotamia, where priests and scribes watched the heavens over long centuries, an unexpected light could be interpreted alongside eclipses, comets, and planetary motions. Those early astronomers were also careful observers of the human heart, though they might not have described it that way. They knew that people look to the sky when they want patterns to reach them from beyond daily life. Some ancient records may describe meteor showers in a way that lets us still recognize them today. The same showers return every year when Earth passes through streams of debris left by comets. The names of those showers sometimes echo the places or creatures associated with the constellations behind them, like the Perseids, which appear to radiate from Perseus, or the Leonids, which seem to pour from Leo. Yet the particles themselves are not truly coming from a point in the constellation. That point is an effect of perspective, a little trick of geometry, like looking down a road and seeing all lines meet at one distant place. Perspective is one of the quietest ideas in astronomy and also one of the most helpful. It reminds us that the shape of what we see often depends on where we stand. This is true on Earth too. A person on a hill sees a valley one way, and a person in the valley sees the hill another. A childhood memory looks different from the distance of many years. A meteor shower seems scattered across the whole sky, yet its source may be a narrow stream of particles, all following nearly the same path. Mind likes to imagine chaos where there is sometimes order, and order where there is only a brief arrangement of chance. Still, even with knowledge, there is no need to become severe about these things. The old stories can stay. The explanations can stay. One does not erase the other. A shooting star may be a tiny particle from a comet, but it can also be the spark that sent a sailor to make a wish, or the sign that made a king pause, or the sight that caused a child to fall silent for one long second. The universe can support both the telescope and the myth without strain, and perhaps the same is true of the meteorite itself once it lands. To a scientist, it becomes a sample, a witness from deep time. To an earlier culture, it might have been sacred stone, a fallen gift, an object from the heavens that deserved a place in a temple or shrine. Some meteorites have indeed been treated with reverence. Their weight, their unfamiliar density, their dark crust, all seem to announce a foreign origin. It is not difficult to understand why a stone that fell from above would be regarded as extraordinary. There are stories from many places where such stones were kept with ceremony. Some were fashioned into objects of devotion, some linked with kingship, some incorporated into rituals, some simply preserved because people knew they had witnessed something rare. In a world where most stones are born of soil and mountain, a stone from the sky feels almost like a visitor. It arrives from a place no road can reach. And then there are the more uncertain stories, the ones that remain just out of reach, like a soft light seen through leaves. Ancient texts sometimes mention fiery signs in the heavens, but the exact nature of what was observed is not always easy to determine. Was it a meteor, a comet, a bolide, an aurora, a planetary conjunction? The language of the time may not distinguish them clearly. And that uncertainty is part of the quiet charm of studying the past. It asks us to be patient, to accept partial knowledge, to let the evidence breathe. The night sky itself is full of those patient invitations. Even now, when so much has been mapped, there are still things not fully settled. The exact composition of some meteoroids can be complex. The behavior of dust streams can shift over time. Some meteor showers wax and wane as gravitational influences reshape the paths of particles. Even the Earth's atmosphere, that broad and invisible sea of air, is always changing in ways that affect what we see from below. A meteor's brilliance is never entirely the same twice. That variation is perhaps part of what makes the experience so memorable. The shape, brightness, duration, color, and speed can all differ. Some meteors are quick and faint, mere scratches of light. Others blaze slowly enough to seem almost hesitant, like a candle carried through dark water. A few leave persistent trains, glowing trails that remain visible for seconds after the meteor has vanished. These trains can twist and drift with high-altitude winds, their forms delicately altered by the moving air. It is a strange and lovely thing to think that a line of fire can become a line of vapor, and then a line of memory in the sky. There are also fireballs, brighter and larger, sometimes casting shadows or briefly lighting the ground with a greenish or golden hue. Rarely a meteor can be so bright that it rivals Venus or even the moon in a small and sudden burst. People who see such events often remember the exact place they were standing, the weather, the smell of the night, the shape of nearby trees or rooftops. The event lasts only seconds, but it places a mark in the mind with unusual clarity. This happens because surprise sharpens attention. The ordinary flow of thought is interrupted, and all the senses gather for a moment. The sky, which can be so easy to ignore, becomes singular. One bright thread is enough to pull the whole scene into focus. Then everything returns to normal, but not quite. A trace of freshness remains. The world feels briefly larger. Some ancient philosophers wondered about these fires in the sky and how they fit into the structure of the cosmos. Aristotle, for example, thought differently from later scientists about what filled the region above the moon. The heavens were once imagined as more perfect, more unchanging, and the appearance of meteors challenged that neat separation. Over time, careful observation revealed that the sky was not sealed away from change. It was a place where matter and motion still acted. That understanding opened into a wider and more flexible view of the universe. The history of astronomy is full of such gentle corrections. One idea settles in for a while, then another arrives with better measurements and deeper patience. The old idea is not always worthless. It may have carried the beauty of a first attempt, but the newer idea can preserve that beauty while making room for more truth. The falling star then becomes not only an object in the sky, but a sign of human learning itself, brief, bright, and always moving toward clearer seeing. There is a quiet dignity in that. Human beings, standing under the dark, have always tried to understand the lights above them. They counted them, named them, mapped them, feared them, blessed them, and eventually measured them. Yet the first step was always simple looking. Before there were observatories, there were eyes. Before there were instruments, there was attention. Attention is a kind of listening. It does not demand, only receives. A patient watcher at night learns how much can be noticed in stillness. The faint drift of a cloud, the change in the color of the horizon, the coldness that gathers at the edge of a field. The sound of insects becoming quieter, and then perhaps the sudden motion of a meteor. It is one more detail in the larger conversation between earth and sky. Sometimes a meteor shower arrives like a seasonal guest. The Perseids in summer, the Leonids in autumn, the Geminids in winter, and others with names older than their modern explanations. The calendar of showers gives the year a slow and quiet structure. Some people track them with scientific interest, while others simply know that certain nights are more generous than usual. If conditions are favorable, the sky can offer many small streaks, one after another, like a sparse and elegant rainfall of light. A rainfall of light is not really an error, even if it sounds poetic. It is one of the reasons meteor showers have so often inspired comparisons to falling snow, fireflies, sparks, or seeds. Language reaches for the closest soft image it can find. The sky is too vast, too bright, too remote to be described by literal fact alone. So we borrow from the fields, the hearth, the orchard, the river. We say the stars are falling, though of course they are not stars at all. We know this, and still we say it. The phrase is useful because it captures the feeling better than the correction does. In many languages, the folk names for meteors reflect this closeness to daily life. They become arrows, tears of saints, willow branches, dragon's breath, heavenly sparks, or fish scales of light. Each name carries a small bridge between the cosmic and the familiar. The event itself is brief, but the name can linger for centuries. That is one of the ways human beings keep company with what is too large to keep directly. Even in the present, meteor watching can feel almost like participating in an old, quiet ritual. One steps outside, lets the eyes adjust, and waits. There is no guarantee. That is part of the charm. The sky is not obliged to perform on cue, but on the right night with enough darkness and patience, a streak appears, and the mind quietly brightens with it. Darkness matters here. The modern world is full of light that is useful, beautiful, and sometimes too persistent for stargazing. Even so, many places still preserve pockets of dark sky where the Milky Way can be seen and meteors can stand out against the velvet background. These darker spaces are not empty. They are full of depth. They allow the eye to travel farther and the imagination with it. The Milky Way itself has long been a source of stories, and sometimes its faintly luminous band can make the whole sky seem like a vast, sleeping river. A meteor crossing that river feels like a quicksilver fish, or a falling ember, or a brief interruption in the current of darkness. Ancient peoples who lived under clearer skies may have seen that band with a familiarity we rarely experience now. They would have known its seasonal rise, its change in angle, its pale brightness. To them, a meteor moving through it might have seemed like an event within an already living celestial landscape. It is worth pausing with the word landscape. The sky can be a landscape, though it lacks ground. We imagine it as a place because we move through it with our gaze. We scan it, cross it, return to familiar stars, notice new lights and measure distances not in steps but in attention. A meteor briefly alters that landscape, like a bird in a still marsh or a lantern crossing a distant hill. Then it is gone, leaving the scene unchanged and somehow also refreshed. Meteorites, when they do land, are often found by chance, or after careful searching in places where their dark crust stands out against snow, sand, or ice. Antarctica has yielded many such stones, preserved by the cold and made easier to spot by the white ground. Desert regions also preserve them well. Some meteorites are iron-rich and dense, some stony, some a mixture. A few contain tiny minerals that formed under conditions older than Earth itself. Scientists examine them for clues about the early solar system, about water, about organic compounds, about the building blocks that may have arrived from space long ago. This is one of the loveliest ideas in quiet astronomy, that the universe may have been bringing pieces of itself to Earth for billions of years, in forms too small to notice most of the time. Dust, ice, stones, and carbon-rich fragments have all played their part in the long exchange. The line between up there and down here is not as absolute as it can seem. Things fall, things rise, things are carried. Some of the oldest known meteorites are fragments from bodies that never became planets, or that were shattered early in the solar system's history. In them, there is a kind of preserved infancy of the cosmic neighborhood. To study them is to look at an ancient workshop, frozen in time. To imagine them crossing space for eons before arriving in a field or on a roof or in a hand is to feel the patience of matter itself. Matter does not hurry. It arrives when its path allows. And there are, of course, the famous falls that entered history as much through circumstance as through science. A stone that lands in a village can become a local legend. A shower of fragments over a known place can be remembered in annals. A bright daylight fireball can astonish people across an entire region. Later, researchers may piece together reports, measurements, and recovered fragments, reconstructing what happened from the scattered witness of many eyes. This detective work is delicate and almost literary in its own way. It gathers small human impressions and gives them a physical story. The mystery is never entirely erased, even when the facts become clearer. Something about a meteoroid's long journey remains beyond complete comprehension. We can know where it likely came from, how fast it entered, what it was made of, and how much energy it released. Yet we cannot quite accompany it through the centuries of its slow drift before that final descent. There is a loneliness in that path and also a kind of serene purpose. It travelled until it met air. Then it became light. The sky has always been a place where people have located their larger imaginations. In Egyptian tradition, stars and the afterlife were closely woven into symbolic patterns. In Norse tales, sparks, fire, and the heavens mingle in great mythic structures. In indigenous traditions across the world, the sky is alive with stories that make use of the same bright materials: motion, distance, return, and transformation. A meteor may be one of the shortest stories the sky tells, but it still belongs to these broader traditions of meaning. And perhaps because it is so short, it is easy to fold into any quiet moment. One can be walking home, sitting on a porch, standing near a river, or lying in bed with a window open to the night, and a meteor can arrive without warning. The experience is democratic in that way. It does not wait for ceremony. It does not require expertise. It asks only for the willingness to look up. Looking up is such a gentle action. It changes the posture of the whole self. The shoulders open a little. The breath slows. The mind, if it has been busy, receives a wider frame. A meteor becomes not just an astronomical event, but a tiny interruption in the rhythm of thought, a moment of widening. Even if it is missed, the possibility of it can soften the night. One can lie under the sky and let the possibility itself become restful. There is something soothing in events that are both rare and predictable. Meteor showers are like that. They can be calculated, yet each individual streak remains partly a surprise. This balance between order and unpredictability is often comforting. It suggests that the universe is neither chaotic nor rigid, but gently dynamic. There are patterns, and there are the small freedoms within them. The meteors belong to that middle space. Perhaps that is why meteor showers have been watched for so many centuries. They make the cosmos feel near but not crowded. They offer motion without alarm. Even a bright fireball is over quickly, leaving no threat behind. The aftermath is quiet. The trail cools. The sky resumes its old composure. Nothing has been broken. Only a tiny grain has changed form. If one were to follow that grain backward in imagination, one could travel to the edge of the solar system, or to the fragments of an ancient comet, or to the debris of an asteroid family, or even to the first dusty assembly of the planets. The origin could be traced in layers, each one more distant and old. It is a patient kind of thinking, almost like descending stairs in the dark with a lamp held low. Step by step, the picture becomes wider. And then perhaps one notices that not everything needs to be traced all the way back in order to be appreciated. Some things are best received as they are. A meteor is such a thing. It begins in the dark, becomes visible, and disappears. That arc is complete enough. The meaning arrives in the seeing. The stone need not remain. The light is already finished before we have fully named it. And yet we keep naming it because naming is another way of accompanying what passes. In older times, some people may have believed that meteor showers announced events on Earth, or that a particularly bright meteor foretold change. The linkage between heaven and earth was once interpreted broadly, sometimes with great seriousness. This did not make people foolish. It made them attentive to correspondence. Human beings have always looked for connections between what happens above and what happens below. The desire is understandable. The sky is large, and the ground is intimate. We live between them. That in-between feeling is one of the oldest human conditions. We are creatures who can look up but must also sleep, work, eat, and mourn. Meteors fit beautifully into that condition because they are themselves in between things. Not quite stone, not quite flame, not quite star, not quite earth. They are travelers. They are transitions. They are the visible crossing of a threshold. A threshold is a gentle word for such a bright event, yet it feels right. The meteor crosses from space to sky, from unseen to seen, from hard matter to vapor and light. The watcher crosses from ordinary thought into a brief awareness of wonder. Then both crossings end. The night returns. This is how many deep experiences occur quietly and without fanfare. And in the quiet after, it is pleasant to think of all the similar events that have occurred without our noticing. All the tiny particles entering the atmosphere over oceans, forests, deserts, and cities. Some are too small to see. Some burn high above us, their light hidden by daylight. Others arrive in regions no one is watching. The Earth is continually receiving these minute visitors. The sky is always active in ways that do not disturb our sleep. That thought can itself be sleepy in a good way. To imagine the atmosphere as a patient veil accepting countless small arrivals, most of them invisible, is to feel the world as continuous and kind. There is no need to keep track of every spark. The larger system holds them. The earth turns. The air flows. The darkness deepens and thins with the hours. Somewhere perhaps a meteor glows briefly and then becomes only a cool trace among many others. Scientists who study meteors often speak of radiant points, orbital debris, velocity, mass, luminous efficiency, and ablation. These are precise words and they help the mind. But beneath them lies the older language of the eye: flash, streak, fire, vanishing. The two languages are not opposed. They are simply different ways of staying close to the same event. One is useful for prediction and understanding. The other is useful for human memory and peace. It is a comfort that both are possible. The universe can be known in terms of motion and composition and still felt as mystery. A meteor shower can be forecast to the hour and still make the heart leap when a bright one suddenly appears. The leap is not disproved by the forecast. It is completed by it because the mind is ready. Perhaps that is one of the quieter gifts of astronomy. It teaches us how to expect wonder without exhausting it. The patient observer knows the season of the shower, the direction of the radiant, the conditions that improve visibility, but no one can schedule the exact moment of delight. That moment keeps some freedom. It remains alive, and so the night continues with its measured breathing. The stars maintain their positions. The planets, if visible, move on their slower roads. The moon, if present, pours a gentler and broader light. A meteor, when it comes, is the briefest traveller among them, the smallest passerby in the great architecture of darkness. It leaves behind no sound we can hear, only the quiet afterimage in the mind. That afterimage may linger while the body grows more still. It may blend with the sensation of blankets, the weight of the pillow, the soft perception of the room. In that half-dreaming space, the meteor becomes almost symbolic of sleep itself, a movement through darkness, a flare, a vanishing, a surrender to quiet. Even the thought of it can be restful. It suggests that a brief brilliance is allowed and then release. Long ago, some civilizations built observatories not only for prediction, but for ceremony, timing, and meaning. The sky was a calendar, a temple, a map, and a storybook all at once. People watched for the heliacal rising of stars, for lunar cycles, for eclipses, for comets, and for sudden lights. The heavens guided agriculture, ritual, navigation, and kingship. In that larger practice, meteors were perhaps less predictable than the great motions of the sun and moon, but they still belonged to the sacred attentiveness of sky watching. That attentiveness has never gone away. It survives in the astronomer at a telescope, the amateur lying on a blanket in a field, the elder telling old stories, the child making a wish, the historian reading a chronicle, the geologist examining a dark stone from a desert, the poet finding in a flash of light a shape for passing time. All of them, in different ways, are attending to what falls and what remains. What remains is often the more interesting question. The streak does not remain, but the memory does. The stone may remain if one lands. The story remains, the measurement remains, the wonder remains, and perhaps the deepest remainder is the changed sense of scale. After seeing a meteor, one may feel the night as both wider and gentler. The sky is not less mysterious for being understood in part. It is more inhabitable. There is no need to press the matter further now. The script can grow still again, like water settling after a pebble has sunk out of sight. The trail of the shooting star has already cooled into darkness. The small ancient traveller has become part of the night's unseen inventory. Above, the air is quiet. Below, the listener can become quiet too. So let the thoughts soften. Let them move as slowly as drifting dust. Let the old stories, the scientific facts, the lost records, the mythic meanings, and the simple beauty of a brief light all rest together without effort. There is room for all of it in the night. And if sleep is drawing near, let it come the way a meteor comes, without argument, without noise, without needing to stay. A brief passage, a gentle brightness, and then the vast, steady dark that holds everything afterward. In that vast, steady dark, there is time to wonder what else has passed above us without being named. The sky has always been larger than our vocabulary for it. Even now, with our charts and cameras and archives, there are nights when a streak of light appears and feels older than any explanation we can give it. It is not that science is absent from the feeling. Rather, science and feeling stand together, quietly, like two lanterns on the same path. Some of the earliest records of unusual lights in the sky were kept with a patience that feels almost devotional. Ancient court astronomers in China noted meteor showers, comets, novae, and eclipses with care, sometimes because an event mattered to the state, sometimes because it mattered to the heavens, and sometimes because the distinction did not seem very large. In the records of the past, a sudden light was never entirely merely a light. was an omen, a schedule marker, a message, a surprise, a reminder that order and irregularity can share the same sky. In Mesopotamia, where generations of observers wrote on clay tablets, the night was studied as a language. The sky was not empty. It was full of signs that had to be read slowly. The scribes who watched for celestial events did not separate knowledge from reverence in the modern way. A meteor might be catalogued alongside a dream, a political event, a weather pattern, or a royal. Even the least dramatic matters of heaven were counted carefully, as if attention itself were a kind of offering. And perhaps it is. To notice is to admit that the world exceeds our habits. A meteor shower makes that abundantly clear. On an ordinary evening, the stars seem arranged so firmly that one forgets how active the heavens are. But a shower reveals the hidden motion. The night is not fixed, it is traversed. It is crossed by debris, dust, and ancient fragments of ancient comets, each one following a path laid down long before human history, perhaps long before the first cities, long before the first names for fire. Those paths can be imagined as faint, invisible rivers in space. A comet passes near the sun and sheds grains of ice and rock, dust made loose by warmth and motion. Over time, those grains spread into a trail. Later, when Earth turns through that trail, the particles strike our atmosphere at astonishing speed and burn. What we see from below is not the grain itself, but the atmosphere answering it. A meteor is an event made by meeting, by friction, by a brief conversation between something ancient in space and the air around our world. The result is so brief that it almost feels like a mistake. But the universe often works through briefness. A drop of dew, a blink, a candle flame, a moth's passage, the opening of a flower, the closing of an eye. Something can be fleeting and still fully real. In sleep, this is understood without needing words. The mind lets go of things as they pass through. It does not require them to remain in order to value them. There is a tenderness in that. The shooting star does not stay to explain itself. It arrives bright enough to interrupt the dark, and then it is gone. The disappearance is part of its form. If it lasted, it would become something else entirely, perhaps frightening, perhaps ordinary, perhaps not a meteor at all. Its beauty lies partly in its consent to vanish. Some cultures saw in that vanishing a sign of the soul or of messages traveling between worlds. In Greek and Roman thought, the sky was a theatre of gods and fate, and sudden lights were folded into that larger drama. In later Europe, a falling star might be read as a prayer answered, a death announced, or a wish invited. The old custom of making a wish on a meteor survives in many places, even among people who know very well that the light is a particle burning in air. Knowledge does not always erase ritual. Often it simply gives the ritual a different kind of depth. A wish made in the dark is not always about superstition. Sometimes it is just the mind, startled by beauty, offering a small inward motion toward hope. For a moment, the watcher feels both tiny and included. The sky is immense, but it has noticed us enough to flash. This is not literally true, and yet emotionally it can feel true. The human heart often speaks in metaphors that are more persistent than facts. There are places on Earth where the night sky seems especially open. High deserts, cold mountains, remote islands, broad plains, and quiet coasts can all give the impression that the heavens are a little nearer, or at least less obstructed by the noise of daily life. Travelers from ancient times often described such skies with wonder. Sailors learned constellations as practical companions. Desert caravans moved by stars. Farmers tracked seasons through the motions of light above them. The sky was never merely decoration. It was a structure of orientation. Even so, meteors were reminders that orientation does not exhaust mystery. A known sky can still produce an unanticipated flash. That is perhaps why people have long been moved by them. They do not cancel the map, they decorate it with surprise. And then there are the stones that sometimes arrive after the light. Meteorites are quieter than meteors. They do not announce themselves in the same way. They may lie where they fall, dark and unassuming, until someone notices a shape unlike the surrounding ground. A meteorite can be mistaken for many ordinary rocks. It may look scorched, dense, pitted, or strangely metallic. In deserts, on ice, in remote fields, they can be discovered by chance or by patient search. Each one is a visitor from elsewhere, a fragment carried across space and delivered to a planet that has already been circling the sun for billions of years. Some meteorites are older than Earth's crust. Some preserve materials from the earliest days of the solar system. In laboratories, they can be studied for clues about chemistry before planets finished forming, about water-bearing minerals, about organic compounds, about the architecture of worlds still in the making. And yet, for all their scientific importance, they retain something almost poetic. They are pieces of elsewhere made local. They are the sky becoming touchable. One can imagine an ancient person finding such a stone and lifting it with caution. It might seem too heavy, too black, too strange to be native to the ground. Across many cultures, meteorites were treated with awe, sometimes as sacred objects, sometimes as tokens of power, sometimes as gifts of the gods. The Kaaba's black stone in Mecca has long inspired discussion and reverence, its exact origin uncertain and wrapped in history and tradition. In other places, meteorite iron was prized for tools, ornaments, and ritual objects. Before smelting became widespread, sky iron must have seemed profoundly mysterious, a metal that had already fallen prepared from the heavens. That mystery has a practical edge. Ancient smiths may have known that such material could be worked differently from terrestrial ore. But to the mind of the broader community, it could still feel like a substance with celestial memory. The arrowhead or blade made from it might carry not just utility but prestige, as though the sky itself had consented to enter human hands in a small and disciplined form. The old stories surrounding falling stars are often less about astronomy than about human attention. A meteor shower can become a festival of watching. People gather in fields, on rooftops, by lakesides, on cliffs, in courtyards, in silent backyards where the noises of the day have finally emptied away. The body grows still. The neck tilts upward, the eyes adjust. With time the dark becomes full of detail. Faint stars begin to appear. The Milky Way may show its pale scattering. A planet may glow with a steadier light. And then unexpectedly a line is drawn across it all. It is remarkable how quickly the mind learns to wait. At first one watches with active expectancy, then the waiting becomes part of the pleasure. The pause between meteors is not an absence but a softening. It allows the eye to rest, the breath to slow, the mind to expand its listening. In that state, even one meteor can feel generous. Two can seem extravagant. A shower can feel like abundance without urgency. Some showers are famous enough to have become annual events in the imagination, even among those who do not know their names. The Perseids, the Geminids, the Leonids, the Lyrids, the Quadrantids, each has its own season and character. Some arrive under warm summer skies, when people are more inclined to lie outdoors and look up. Others come in the cold months, when the air is crisp and the stars seem almost sharpened by frost. Their names preserve old constellations and old ways of dividing the heavens. The showers are not tied to human calendars, but humans have made calendars around them anyway, as if to make a place for their returning. Return is a comforting idea. The Earth returns to the same region of debris each year. The shower comes back. The stars return to their patterns. The moon wanes and waxes, yet each return is not identical. The weather differs, the observer differs, the air is different, the mood of the world differs. A meteor seen in childhood is not the same as a meteor seen in adulthood because the watcher has changed. That is one reason memory clings to these moments. A meteor is easy to remember not because it is large, but because it is exact. It is a single event in a field of repetition. It divides the night into before and after. People remember where they were, who was beside them, whether they made a wish, whether they were alone, whether the light seemed green, white, yellow, red, or blue, whether it left a glowing train, whether it broke apart, whether it was followed by an audible silence so intense it felt like a sound. Some fireballs are so bright they cast shadows. Some leave persistent trains that linger in the atmosphere for seconds or minutes. Occasionally, a meteor detonates with a sound associated with shock waves, though the sound may arrive later or be reported as a kind of electronic crackle in the stillness of perception. Many such details live in personal accounts, and personal accounts are part of the long human archive of the sky. Before instruments could record every flare, the witness was the instrument. That witness has always been shaped by culture. In one time and place, a meteor might signal divine favor. In another, war. In another, change in the king's fortune. In another, it might be nothing more than an event to note for future prediction. Yet even when explanation changes, the emotional response often remains similar. A sudden light in the sky arrests attention because it reminds us that the world is not only persistent but eventful. Something can happen above us without our permission. There is a small humility in that. It is not a painful humility. It can be soothing. The mind, relieved of responsibility, is allowed simply to observe. The sky is not asking to be managed. It is happening in its own time. A meteor shower makes that plain, and then lets it go. Many ancient peoples built myths around the heavens because the sky invited myth. The constellations themselves were stories made stable enough to navigate by. Orion, Cassiopeia, Perseus, Andromeda, the Pleiades, the Hyades, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, all of them became companions in the patterned dark. A meteor crossing these figures could feel like a messenger moving between scenes. In some traditions, the streak of a meteor was thought of as a spirit, a fire serpent, a guardian, a warning, or a lost soul traveling on. These ideas vary widely, but they share a deep intuition. The sky is alive with passage. Passage is perhaps the central feeling of meteor watching. Nothing remains fixed in the moment of the streak. The light is only motion made visible. Even the grains themselves are invisible until they burn. The phenomenon teaches that movement can reveal itself through disappearance. This is not unlike certain aspects of memory, which often becomes clearest after the event is over. We understand some things best in retrospect when they have already changed. The same can be said of history. The fragments that survive are rarely the complete story. A shard of pottery, a line in a chronicle, a ruined wall, a burned tablet, a stone in a field, a note in an observatory log, a legend repeated around a fire, a name carved into a tomb, a dark fleck analyzed in a laboratory. Each is a remnant, each is a remainder. Human beings, like meteors, leave trails, though ours are slower and more tangled. We travel through time and leave behind traces in archives, in ruins, in songs, in family memory, in maps, in the habits of language. There is a resemblance, then, between meteorites and history itself. Both are fragments that arrive from distant conditions. Both require interpretation. Both carry more than they appear to carry. A stone from space may seem simple until one asks where it formed, how it traveled, what its minerals remember. An old document may seem simple until one asks who wrote it, for whom, under what pressure, and what it leaves unsaid. In both cases, the surface is only the beginning, and yet perhaps this is too active for bedtime. It is enough to let the thought drift softly. The sky gives and the sky withholds. The mind receives a little and then rests. That is the proper rhythm of a quiet evening. There is another gentle truth about meteors. Most of them are tiny. The splendor we see is disproportionate to the material involved. A grain of sand can create a streak bright enough to be noticed from the ground. A fragment smaller than a pebble can blaze across an entire portion of sky. This disproportion is one of the reasons the phenomenon feels magical. The universe takes something minute and allows it a grand gesture. The ordinary becomes luminous by speed and circumstance. Perhaps that is quietly reassuring. Not every small thing remains small in effect. Not every brief moment lacks significance. A word spoken in kindness can linger for years. A glance can alter a memory. A decision made softly can shape a life. The meteor in its brief blaze is a natural emblem of this principle. It does not have to stay to matter, and after it is gone, the dark is not empty. It is simply returned to itself. This too is important. A meteor shower is not constant brightness. It is darkness punctuated by brightness. The intervals matter because they allow the eyes to recover and the imagination to wander. If the sky were full of unbroken flame, no single streak would be special. Contrast is what gives the meteor its grace. In old star catalogues, the heavens were often divided into practical regions for keeping track of motion. Different cultures drew boundaries differently. Some imagined celestial roads, some fields, some animals, some rivers, some palaces, some ships. The same stars could carry distinct identities across cultures and centuries. The meteors crossing those star fields would not have cared about the names. They belonged to the physical sky, not the symbolic one. But human beings who live in symbols as well as in physics found meaning in the encounter. On a clear night, one can feel how ancient that impulse is. Even now, away from city glare, the stars can seem to restore an older relation to time. The sky does not hurry. The constellations move with such vast patience that human lives appear like brief flickers below them. Yet the same sky can also produce a sudden rush of motion. That contrast between slowness and speed may be one reason meteor showers fascinate us so deeply. They compress the scale of cosmic time into a human instant. You may think of the dust trail itself as something like a line drawn long ago and never erased. A comet, as it circles the sun, is gradually shedding its own body. Each pass leaves a little more material behind. In this sense, a meteor shower is a kind of residue becoming visible. We are seeing the aftermath of previous journeys. The light above us is the consequence of old departures. There is a subtle melancholy there, though not a sad one. It is more like the feeling of a faded letter or a room after a guest has left. The trace remains, though the traveller has gone. That traveller may have crossed the inner solar system many times, possibly for millennia, while Earth has turned beneath, carrying oceans, forests, cities, and sleeping people. The debris in space is a record of motion without memory until we look at it and give it memory. A meteor shower therefore joins the impersonal and the intimate. The physics is grand, even severe. The emotion is soft, often private. A person alone outside on a late night may look up and feel themselves somehow addressed. No message is encoded, and yet the heart may receive one. That is not an error. It is a feature of being human under sky. In many languages, the words for sky, heaven, and weather are intertwined in old ways. This is not accidental. The atmosphere above us has always been the place where practical conditions and transcendent feeling overlap. Rain, lightning, clouds, birds, sunset, moonrise, meteor all occupy the same broad realm of perception. The night sky especially invites this blending because it is both empty and full. Its emptiness makes room for thought. Its fullness makes thought reverent. A long silence can be useful here. A long pause with no meteor at all can deepen the watching. The eye becomes more sensitive. The mind becomes less eager. The body settles further into the ground or bed or chair. If sleep is near, the meteor shower becomes less an external event than an atmosphere of possibility. One may drift in and out of awareness while still feeling the sky's openness. There are old stories of people finding comfort in stars during uncertainty. Exiles, travelers, sailors, shepherds, prisoners, monks, astronomers, lovers separated by distance, children listening to adults tell of the heavens. The night sky can be a companion because it is indifferent in a kindly way. It does not intrude. It does not demand. It simply remains, changing enough to be alive, stable enough to be trusted. Meteors, in contrast, are the sky's interruptions, but even interruptions can be kind when they are brief. They remind us that the world can still surprise us without disturbing us. This matters in an age that often feels overfilled with abruptness. A meteor is a surprise that does not require response. We may just receive it. We may let it pass. We may fall asleep with the image of it still warming the inner dark. It is interesting, too, that meteor showers are often best observed by looking not directly at the radiant, but at the broader sky around it. The streaks appear anywhere and everywhere, as if the source point were merely a direction of origin and not the whole story. This has a quiet philosophical resonance. What matters is not only the center from which things seem to come, but the whole field where they arrive. Life often works this way. Causes may be localized, but experience spreads widely. The shower expands the visible sky. It trains the eye to attend to more than one point. It encourages a generous awareness. Even the little patches of darkness between stars become meaningful, because that is where the streak may cross next. One learns to look without tightening the gaze. That is a skill useful far beyond astronomy. In history, as in the heavens, many things are understood only at the edges. Lost civilizations are known through fragments. Some cities have vanished beneath sand, jungle, silt, or sea. Some languages remain undeciphered or only partially read. Some myths persist without clear origin. Some observatories were built, used, abandoned, and later found again. A meteor shower is a recurring fragment of cosmic history visible to everyone, and yet it still feels like a discovery each time. It is a reminder that recurrence and surprise are not opposites. A person who watches long enough may begin to hear their own thoughts grow softer. The mind, no longer needing to chase every image, begins to resemble the sky itself, spacious, dim, and not entirely empty. This is a peaceful state. It is one in which memory can loosen and imagination can rest. A bedtime script can take advantage of that spaciousness without crowding it. It can simply suggest, in a gentle voice, that all the old facts of the sky are safe to keep in the background while sleep does its quieter work. So remember the ancient observers counting nights from stone platforms and temple roofs. Remember the clay tablets and star charts, the monk illuminating an astronomical manuscript, the navigator checking the sky over dark water, the child in a village courtyard, the modern scientist comparing data, the amateur on a summer blanket, the desert stone lifted carefully from the sand. All of them are part of one long human habit, looking up. And remember the more ordinary facts too, because they too can be soothing. Most meteors are no larger than grains of dust. They burn high in the atmosphere, often dozens of miles above the ground. The streak we see is the result of enormous speed meeting thin air. The brightest ones are sometimes called fireballs. Occasionally a meteor is called a bolide when it is especially brilliant and may fragment. Meteor showers appear when Earth's orbit crosses a stream of debris, so the same family of particles returns in season. The names of the showers often come from the constellation near the radiant. These facts are simple, and their simplicity has a calming honesty. They tell us that wonder does not require uncertainty, only openness. The more one understands the process, the more elegant it can seem. The shower becomes not less beautiful but more woven into the architecture of the world. The cosmic dust was once part of a larger body, then part of a trail, then part of an atmosphere, then part of a human memory. In that chain, nothing is wasted. Even the vanished light participates in continuity. Continuity is a fine companion for sleep. It suggests that one need not hold every thought in place. One can be carried along by broad emotions as a small boat is carried by a slow tide. The meteor's path is gone, but the conditions that allowed it are still present. The sky endures. The earth turns. The listener breathes. The room is quiet. The blanket is warm. The mind can relinquish the need to follow each thread. If there is any lingering question about what shooting stars leave behind, the answer is both precise and gentle. They leave behind very little visible trace in the sky, and sometimes a stone on the ground, and always an enlargement of attention in the person who saw them. They leave behind knowledge of the atmosphere, dust from ancient comets, data for astronomers, stories for cultures, wishes for children, names for showers, and a trace of astonishment that can return even after the event has passed. They also leave behind a particular kind of silence, not a void but a satisfied silence, the kind that follows a bell heard in a distant valley, or the settling of snow, or the closing of a book at the end of a good chapter. It is a silence in which something has happened and then been safely received. And now the night can keep doing what it has always done. It can hold stars in their places, dust in its invisible rivers, comets in their long arcs, and sleepers in their quiet rooms. The old sky is not demanding anything. It is only there, immense and patient and filled with motions too slow for the eye to notice and too quick for the mind to keep. Somewhere above, a grain may already be traveling, waiting for its brief appointment with air. Somewhere below, the listener may already be drifting toward the place where even bright things become soft. Let the breathing deepen a little. Let the thoughts thin and lengthen. Let the mind become as kind to itself as the dark is. The shooting star has passed, but the calm it leaves behind can remain. And if one more small light should appear in the inner sky of memory, let it come and go without effort. Let it brighten for a moment, then fade into the larger quiet. There is no need to follow it. There is only the resting after. So the trail of the meteor is finished now, though its afterglow survives in the imagination like a pale thread. The ancient dust has done its brief work. The story has moved from motion to stillness. The sky remains, the night remains, the body remains warm and safe and heavy with rest. And in that gentle remaining, sleep can arrive the way the earth turns into the shadow, slowly and without alarm, until at last everything is held in the soft, familiar dark. But even after that soft dark has settled, there is still more to notice about these quiet visitors from space, because a shooting star is not only a tiny event in the sky. It is also a little meeting point between very large histories. Long before any person looked up and gave a name to the light, the materials that become meteors were already moving through the solar system. They were part of the same ancient abundance that formed planets, moons, dust lanes, and comets. In a sense, each streak of light is a remnant of old arrangements, a delicate leftover from processes so vast that human memory can hold only a few bright fragments of them. This makes meteor showers feel almost like a calendar written by nature. The year turns, and certain nights become known for their recurring silver threads. The Perseids come in the warmth of late summer, when the air is often still enough to hear insects and feel the faint pressure of heat stored in stone. The Leonids arrive later, sometimes with dramatic abundance, their history bound to the comet Tempel-Tuttle, whose orbit has been traced and retraced by generations of astronomers. The Geminids, oddly enough, are not from a typical comet at all, but from an object called 3200 Phaethon, which behaves in a manner that seems to sit quietly between asteroid and comet, a reminder that the sky does not always fit clean categories as neatly as a written list might suggest. There is something restful in that too. The universe is not in a hurry to be tidy for us. Ancient observers knew these showers only as part of the sky's changing habit. They did not have telescopes or orbital equations, but they had patience, and that can be a form of knowledge all its own. In old records from China, Korea, Japan, and the Islamic world, bright meteors and recurring showers were carefully noted. Court astronomers recorded unusual celestial events because they understood that the sky in many cultures was a kind of sacred ledger. A light that flashed across it might be treated as an omen, or a sign, or a message whose meaning had to be interpreted with humility. In Europe as well, chronicles sometimes described stars falling in clusters, especially when a shower was bright enough to turn a quiet night into a page of moving sparks. The people who watched these events were often not trying to separate wonder from science. They were simply trying to be accurate in a world that still felt full of hidden correspondences. There is a tenderness in that old accuracy. To notice a meteor is to admit that one has been briefly interrupted by beauty. It is a small surrender, and perhaps that is why so many traditions gathered meanings around it. In some places, a falling star was a soul, descending or ascending. In some stories, it was a divine messenger. In others, it was just a stone or spark, but even then it retained a mystery because it seemed to arrive from nowhere and vanish before it could be fully held in the mind. Human beings have always been drawn to such vanishing things. They resemble thoughts as they first appear, clear for an instant and then gone before language can pin them down. The Old World was especially fond of sky signs because the night sky was one of the few shared spaces over enormous distances. A farmer, a sailor, a desert traveler, and a philosopher could all look upward and see the same slow wheel of stars. A meteor crossing that common ceiling would have felt personal and public at once. It would belong to everyone and to no one. Perhaps that is one reason shooting stars became associated with wishes. A wish is a private thing made possible by a public moment. It is a small inward gesture created by the appearance of something larger than oneself. Even now, when the mechanism of meteors is well understood, the wish does not lose its softness. It simply gains another layer of meaning, as if the mind can rest more peacefully when it knows that enchantment and explanation are not enemies. There are also quieter facts about meteors that can settle the imagination. A meteor is usually no larger than a grain of sand. Sometimes it is even smaller. A tiny fragment moving at astonishing speed can make a bright streak because speed itself helps create the spectacle. It is the friction, the heating of air, the ionization and glowing plasma, all taking place in an instant so brief that the eye experiences it as a single silver gesture. Something so small can seem so grand. That too feels like a bedtime lesson. The world often does not require enormous things in order to make beauty. A spark can be enough. A breath can be enough. A thought can be enough to carry the mind from worry into quiet. If one follows the trail a little farther, one arrives at the comet. Comets are among the old wanderers of the solar system, carrying frozen material, dust, and volatile ices that awaken when sunlight warms them. Their tails are not like earthly fire, despite the old imagery, but like streamed breath and light. When a comet approaches the sun, it can leave behind a trail of debris. Over time, the Earth may pass through that trail, and the result is a meteor shower. The grand arc of a comet thus becomes a shower of tiny fleeting lights, and the continuity between them is almost musical. What once was one body becomes many small events, each with its own brief brightness. In that way, a shower is not a random scattering, but a kind of dispersed inheritance. In a very old sense, the sky is full of inheritances. The stars themselves are not untouched. They form, evolve, and end. Their materials are shared. Their remnants go on. The dust that eventually becomes new planets or the elements in our own bodies was forged in older stars. Iron in the blood, calcium in the bones, carbon in living tissue, all have histories beyond the present moment. This is a thought that has comforted many people in many ways. It means that the body resting now in the dark is made from ancient abundances, not from isolation. It belongs to a chain of becoming. The same universe that can send a tiny meteoroid through the atmosphere also, over immense spans of time, arranges matter into eyes capable of noticing it. And the eyes, when they are tired, do not need to solve the sky. They only need to receive it. There is a pleasure in receiving rather than grasping. The eyes can soften, the shoulders can lower, the breath can become long and quiet, the mind can stop trying to catch each falling light and instead simply let the sequence unfold. One streak, then another. Then the dark between them, that dark is not emptiness. It is the space in which each event can be seen clearly. Even in sleep, life is shaped by intervals. Rest, like the sky, is made of both presence and pause. There is something strangely human about naming things that disappear quickly. The word meteor itself comes from the Greek meteoros, meaning high in the air, lofty, suspended. The old language catches the feeling well. The lights are neither fully of heaven nor of earth, but somewhere in between. They are visible because they are passing through a middle realm. Perhaps that is why they have always seemed like thresholds. They are a reminder that not everything important lasts long enough to be held. Some things are meant only to be witnessed. Witnessing is a quiet act. It asks for patience and often for stillness. In old villages, people would lie on roofs, sit in courtyards, or stand in fields to watch for showers. The body would grow drowsy under the open sky. Eyes would adjust to darkness. Sounds would soften. The mind would begin to widen rather than narrow. A meteor shower can encourage exactly that state, the state in which attention floats gently between alertness and release. It is one of the rare occasions when waiting itself feels like a kind of gift. Nothing urgent is happening, and still anything may appear. Some cultures gathered meteor stories into mythic patterns. In Norse lore, the reign of stars and the movement of the heavens belonged to a cosmos alive with traversable paths, bridges, and shining realms. In Greek tradition, the heavens were populated by gods and heroes whose transformations could explain strange appearances in the sky. In indigenous traditions across the world, meteors have been understood in many different ways, each shaped by landscape, ancestry, and communal memory. The point is not that all these meanings are the same, but that all of them show a willingness to let the sky speak in more than one register. A meteor can be a physical event and also a cultural one, a scientific phenomenon and also a story whose retelling helps a people dwell within mystery. There is no need to hurry past those old stories. They are part of the quiet trail too. They show that humans have long used the sky to organize grief, hope, fear, and belonging. A falling star could mark the soul of a leader, the passing of an age, the visit of a deity, or simply the astonishing fact that the night is not always still. In the days before electric light, when darkness was more complete, the appearance of any sudden brightness would have felt especially sharp. Today, with so many illuminated windows and screens, the raw darkness of a clear sky can seem almost rare. A meteor against that dark can feel like a memory of a deeper night, one in which the stars are less background decoration than living company. There are practical reasons the sky fascinates astronomers as well. Meteors are not only beautiful but useful. Their paths can help measure atmospheric density. Their compositions, when studied carefully, can reveal information about primitive solar system material. Occasionally, a larger body survives the descent and becomes a meteorite, offering scientists and collectors a touchable piece of the cosmos. Meteorites have been held in hands by people across time, sometimes revered, sometimes studied, sometimes mistaken for ordinary stone until their density or fusion crust suggested a more extraordinary origin. In some ancient sites, meteorite iron was fashioned into objects long before terrestrial iron smelting became common. A blade or bead made from such metal would literally carry a piece of the sky. It is easy to imagine why such materials were treasured. They were rare, and they seemed to arrive from the borderland between worlds. In Egypt, iron from meteoritic sources appears in very early artifacts, a fact that makes the desert civilization feel, for a moment, even more closely linked to the heavens it observed. In the Arctic and in other remote regions, meteorites have also been woven into local histories and practical lives. The famous Cape York meteorite in Greenland, for example, was used by Inuit communities as a source of iron for tools. A stone from the sky becomes a useful edge, and the edge then helps human hands shape the world below. That is an elegant chain. Nothing is wasted. Nothing remains only abstract when it can be turned into living work. Yet even when a meteorite is recovered, the better-known meteors never reach the ground. They burn out and become pure event, visible but not holdable. This makes them resemble certain kinds of memory. Some experiences leave evidence. Others are preserved only in the mind's glow. The best stories often contain both. They hold an outer fact and an inner afterimage. A shower of meteors can be catalogued with dates, radiance, and orbital debris streams, and still it can remain emotionally larger than the sum of those details. That is because the human heart responds not only to information, but to duration, rhythm, and surprise. A meteor gives all three. It is brief, it recurs, and it arrives unexpectedly. The recurrence is important. One meteor might feel like a coincidence. A shower feels like a pattern. Patterns are soothing because they imply that the world has habits. Not every night, perhaps, but enough nights that the sky can be trusted to behave in an intelligible way. This is part of why ancient calendars were so carefully kept. People watched seasonal skies, rising stars, solstices, equinoxes, and recurring showers because the heavens offered markers by which life on Earth could be organized. Planting, sailing, ritual, and record-keeping all benefited from the patient observation of celestial rhythms. A night sky full of repeated motions could feel like a map drawn slowly by time itself. The ancient Mayans, for example, created sophisticated systems for tracking cycles of the sky. The Babylonians left careful records of planetary movement. The Chinese imperial court maintained astronomical observations with astonishing consistency. These traditions remind us that curiosity is not a modern invention. Long before the invention of optical instruments, people looked upward with discipline. They were scientists in the oldest sense of the word, lovers of knowledge who understood that the sky could be read if one paid attention long enough. Meteors, because they are so abrupt, were especially striking against the steadiness of those records. They were the unpredictable notes in an otherwise measured composition. Still, the unpredictability had its own kind of order. A meteor shower is not random in the way a single flash is random. It has geometry. Earth crosses the path of debris at known times. The radiant appears in a consistent place. The night offers its old surprise in a repeated frame. That combination of novelty and structure can be deeply calming. It suggests that wonder need not depend on chaos. The universe can surprise us in an organized way. There are even small human customs connected to meteor nights that feel tender now. Some people made outings of it, bringing blankets and tea or sitting on porches with family members. Others memorized the best dates for showers and made quiet little plans around them, as though the calendar had inserted a gift. Children were often told to make wishes. Adults, perhaps pretending not to, may have done the same, and why not? A wish is harmless in the best sense because it does not demand immediate proof. It simply opens a space inside the self, a small room with a window facing upward. A window facing upward is a lovely image for sleep. It suggests that even while the body lies down, a part of the mind may remain open just enough to receive peace. The sky does not rush in. It enters as a hush. The stars are distant but not indifferent. The meteors are transient but not meaningless. The whole arrangement is one of proportions, and proportions can be restful. Nothing is too near. Nothing is too far. The event is large enough to matter, small enough to pass. Sometimes meteor showers are named not only for their radiant, but for the myths around their dates or associated constellations. The Perseids echo Perseus, a figure of Greek legend who once faced a monstrous gaze and emerged with the kind of courage that myths preserve in concentrated form. The Orionids carry the name of the hunter in the winter sky. The Leonids belong to Leo, a lion set among stars. These constellations themselves are human patterns projected onto ancient light, stories made of dots. It is fitting then that showers associated with them should feel like brief narrative flourishes, as if the old myths are still writing themselves in flashes and then erasing the line before anyone can claim ownership. Mythology often does this. It gives form to what is not easily held. A falling star becomes a messenger because messages are among the few things that can cross distance without a body. Or it becomes a soul because a soul, in many traditions, is likewise imagined as traveling lightly. Or it becomes a sign because signs are ways of acknowledging connection without over-explaining it. None of these meanings cancel the others. They rest beside one another like pages in the same old book, each illuminated by a different lamp. There is also an almost childlike comfort in the scale of a meteor. The world can be immense and difficult to comprehend, but a meteor does one thing: it shines, it vanishes, it leaves a trace in the mind. This clarity is soothing. So many human concerns are layered and slow, tangled with memory and anticipation. But a meteor resolves itself in an instant. Its life as a visible streak is simpler than a sentence. It is enough to watch it without needing to manage it. One can let it happen and then let it be over. The atmosphere itself becomes part of the story then. It is not just empty space surrounding Earth. It is an active, protective layer, gently turning debris into light. Without the atmosphere, there would be no meteor in the familiar sense, only an object passing through the void. The glow is a result of encounter. This too can be a bedtime thought, so much beauty depends on meeting. Light meeting air, dust meeting motion, memory meeting attention. Silence meeting the end of a thought. The world is full of quiet conjunctions. Some of the most evocative meteor events in history have been recorded not only for their beauty, but for their dramatic quantity. The Leonid storm of 1833, for example, was so intense that many observers felt as though the heavens had become a field of falling sparks. That event left a strong mark on North American religious and scientific culture alike. People who saw it often described a sense of awe so profound that it blurred into fear and reverence. But even those great storms, though remembered vividly, eventually recede into history. What remains is the record, the testimony, and the knowledge that the sky can sometimes open its quiet hand and let a dazzling handful of light pass through. History itself is like that. Its brightest moments are brief compared with the long dark intervals between them. Emperors, temples, libraries, roads, ports, and cities rise and fall. What survives is often partial, a shard of pottery, a line of text, a ruined wall, a fragment of song. A meteor is almost perfectly aligned with this condition of survival through fragment. It is over before it can be possessed, yet it persists through description. If one is interested in lost civilizations, this is a good place to rest for a while, because meteor records are among the ways ancient people tried to preserve the unpreservable. They wrote down the sky's brief actions as carefully as they could, aware that the moment itself would be gone, but the memory might still matter to someone later. In that way, astronomers of the past were archivists of disappearance. They preserved the ephemeral. They knew that some events need not be repeated to be important. Once witnessed, once recorded, once passed into community memory, they could shape a culture's sense of time. The sky became not only a place of gods or omens, but a place of data. Both are forms of attention. Both ask the observer to be humble. There is humility in understanding that a meteor shower is not the universe tossing things at us personally, but simply Earth moving through a long-established path. Yet this humility does not diminish the experience, it enlarges it. The shower becomes part of celestial mechanics, which is more beautiful than random chance and no less wondrous than any old tale. To know that the lights come from a stream of debris left by a comet is to discover that what looks like a sudden gift is actually the visible edge of a very long history. The light is only the final moment of a story that began far away and long ago. And because the story began long ago, the mind can loosen its grip on the present. It can imagine deep time without strain. The solar system formed from a disk of gas and dust around the newborn sun. Small bodies collided and aggregated. Some became planets, some remained as asteroids. Some became comets, traveling from distant reservoirs where the sun's warmth is weak. Over eons, these bodies shed fragments. Those fragments found paths that intersected Earth's orbit. The Earth, meanwhile, continued its own patient turning. And now, at a certain hour on a certain night, the listener may be lying in bed while one of those fragments becomes a whisper of light high overhead. The scale is enough to quiet almost any restless thought. There is relief in being very small within a very large pattern, not insignificance exactly, but proportion. The self becomes part of the same natural order that includes meteors, comets, clouds, and the hidden circulation of dust. A person breathing in a room is already participating in a long planetary exchange. Air enters and leaves, heat radiates, muscles relax. The body becomes less effortful, as if it too were learning the sky's lesson of motion followed by release. Some astronomers and historians have noted that meteor showers have also played a role in popular culture in ways both serious and gentle. They have inspired poems, paintings, stories, and folklore. They have provided settings for promises and private thoughts. Lovers have watched them together. Solitary watchers have used them as companions in difficult seasons. Travelers have carried the memory of a shower from one place to another as a kind of internal compass. The image of a shooting star is so concise that it enters many languages with ease. Even those who have never studied astronomy can understand the feeling of seeing something bright and gone. It may be worth lingering on the word gone. Gone is not the same as erased. A meteor's visible path goes away, but its meaning does not necessarily vanish with it. The eye keeps a trace. The mind keeps a trace. A person may remember the exact angle of the line or the brief widening of light at the end. The memory can become softer with time, but not less valuable. In a way, this is similar to the fate of ancient cities buried under sand or forest. Their active lives end, but their outlines remain in fragments, in maps, in stories, in archaeology. Disappearance does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means the beginning of another mode of presence. This is a useful thought for night hours. Not every brightness needs to continue in the same form. Not every moment has to stay visible to be real. The body can let go of a few daytime certainties. The room is still here. The bed is still here. The breath is still here. The thoughts, like meteors, can come and go. Some are brighter than others. Some leave no trace at all. That is all right. The sky does not object. It is accustomed to movement. There is a particularly quiet beauty in the idea that a meteor shower is a kind of environmental crossing. Earth travels through space, and the debris field left by a comet is part of that environment. This means that the shower is not an intrusion from outside the cosmos, but a meeting within it. The planet and the trail are both participants in the same larger dance. The eye, which watches from the planet, is also part of that arrangement. It notices what is happening because it too is made of matter arranged by the same long story. In this sense, looking at a meteor is one of the cosmos noticing itself. That can be a very stilling thought. Some old philosophical traditions would have appreciated that. Stoics, for instance, admired the order of nature and the acceptance of things beyond control. A meteor shower is a perfect image for that attitude. One cannot command a meteor to appear, nor can one make it stay. One can only prepare by being present. Presence is perhaps the simplest discipline and the most difficult. It requires neither force nor accumulation, only attention. And attention, when softened for bedtime, becomes nearly indistinguishable from rest. The night around the listener may now feel even deeper, as though the room has expanded its borders without changing its walls. That is what happens when one thinks of the sky long enough. The familiar becomes nested inside the immense. The ceiling is still a ceiling, and yet the mind knows it as a small piece of a larger dome. That knowledge can be held lightly. It need not wake anything. It can simply settle. If there were to be one more quiet fact to carry into sleep, it might be this. Meteors are seen more often after midnight because the side of Earth turning into the direction of travel tends to encounter more particles. The planet's motion contributes to the experience. The world itself is moving into the trail. There is something reassuring about that. Even the surprise has a schedule. Even the fleeting light is bound to the planet's rotation. The hidden architecture of the cosmos includes a rhythm that can be learned, anticipated, and awaited without tension. So the watcher may imagine midnight hours as a time when the Earth is gently presenting itself to the darker road ahead, and the sky is offering its own brief acknowledgements in return. Nothing needs to be dramatic. The most beautiful things often are not. A meteor does not arrive with sound. It does not announce itself with a trumpet. It simply appears, and for an instant the dark is stitched with brightness. Then the thread is withdrawn, leaving the fabric intact. This is perhaps the best image to keep near sleep. The fabric remains. A stitch is made and then removed, yet the cloth is still whole. The night sky is like that. The shower changes it for a moment but does not disturb its patient vastness. The listener's breathing is like that too. Each breath comes in, leaving an impression, then leaves again, and the body remains supported. Repetition does not become monotony when it is gentle. It becomes a lullaby. And so the old trail of shooting stars can continue in memory without demanding wakefulness. The ancient dust still travels, the comet still follows its patient loop, the atmosphere still turns particles into glimmer, the constellations still hold their old names, myth and measurement still sit side by side, quietly content. The world below remains warm and dim and safe enough for rest. The sky above remains clear enough to imagine and soft enough to release. Let the thoughts become as light as the meteors themselves, and then lighter still, until they are only passing glows without effort or hold. Let each one enter and leave. Let the spaces between them grow longer. The mind does not need to follow every trail. It can simply notice that the trails exist and that they end, and that the ending is not a loss but a return to the larger quiet. In that larger quiet, the stars are not lonely, and neither is the sleeper. Both belong to the same old night. Both are held by the same patient sky. And as the final remnant of brightness fades into the dark, sleep can come without ceremony, as softly as dust settling after light has passed, as gently as a comet's forgotten breath becoming a silver line for a moment, and then nothing more than peace.